For over 2 years, you've been asking me to rank the Dreamworks animation films. So now, after 6 months of movie watching, it's time to stop and rank all 39 theatrically released or intended to be theatrically released Dreamworks animation films from the worst to the best. Hi, my name is Sean, and I started this channel because I was driving everyone around me crazy talking about movies way too much. If you can relate, you're probably in the right place. Consider clicking that subscribe button. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. Let me know your ranking of the Dreamworks animation films. This list was so big, I decided to split it into, in today's video, we're looking at the bottom 19 Dreamworks animation films, and tomorrow I will come back and give you the top 20 Dreamworks animation films. My list is not the right list, it's just my list, and I would love to see yours down below in the comment section. And let's get started. In last place, B Movie. It starts off feeling like an okay Pixar knockoff, so how bad could it be? Unfortunately, pretty bad. I mean, it's fun to have Jerry Seinfeld in the lead. There's a couple of moments with some witty bee humor, but the central premise is just so awkward and uncomfortable. You have a bee falling in love with a human, so some nice bestiality. And everything it does from there is just so weird. Like he becomes a lawyer and it becomes a courtroom drama. Then the big finale involves a woman learning to fly a plane by watching his bee flight patterns. By the time you get to the end of it, this one just has no sting. Number 38, Home. A complete and total misfire from beginning to end. It's a happy, family-friendly movie about aliens taking over the planet and putting people in happy concentration camps. It's not so cute or happy as soon as you think about it. It thinks it can get away with that because the aliens are so quirky and naive, but it really doesn't work. Beyond that, the way that the aliens talk is annoying, and Jim Parsons' character in particular is supposed to be the most annoying of all of them. So the plot was annoying, the characters were annoying, the way the characters talk is annoying, and anytime you say the word annoying this much inside of a movie review, it's a bad sign and annoying in and of itself. Next up is The Boss Baby. This movie has energy to spare, but all directed towards a tedious story. Maybe there's some sort of interesting idea inside of this film, but it just feels so overblown with just a series of nonsensical ideas, and the entire thing replaces wit with farts, vomit, and dancing. There's also a lot of problematic messages and themes here. Like, I get it's targeting children, but anyone old enough to actually play out the implications of what's going on in this story will probably have a lot of issues with it. But we do have a sequel coming in just a few months, so bogus. Number 36, Trolls World Tour. The basic premise here about the 6 strings, the troll tribes, and Poppy trying to bring them together feels like a fun and absurd take on epic journeys. But the movie, instead of being a fun send-up of epics and the hero's journey, is instead an oddly preachy film that can't seem to get its message straight. Clearly, it wants to be a movie about unity and accepting people who are different. But as soon as the adventure begins, it makes it very clear that people who are different are very dangerous. The movie is all about not breaking up into different groups over our differences. And as soon as they unite, Poppy and Barb form a girl group. The movie simply can't decide what it's all about. Poppy trying to prove herself as queen. Prejudice being bad. Cultural appropriation. Differences are good and important. Unity. It simply can't decide what it is and what it's about. But one thing it is not is good. Oh yeah, and unlike the first movie, the music isn't even memorable this time around. At number 35, Antz. Dreamworks Animation's very first film is an odd one. Very clearly, they were trying to find their unique tone and style, and what they came up with for this film, I don't think really works. It has a very kiddie aesthetics because it is about bugs and being on an adventure, but there's also a bunch of mature language, themes, and tones all throughout the entire film. There's a bunch of minor curse words that you just simply don't normally see in animated films like this. There's some discussion about erotic fantasies that a character is happening. Stallone's character gets tortured. You see fields filled with dead bodies. There's also like a discussion going on throughout the entire film about collectivism versus individualism that children simply won't understand. So it's a movie that's trying to be very kiddie while not being very kiddie at all. The movie has a 92% on Rotten Tomatoes, but its audience score is only 52%. So based off that, I'm probably not alone in thinking that this film hasn't held up very well. Then we have Penguins of Madagascar. This spin-off from Madagascar is very far removed from its origins. The series started with a simple story about zoo animals going off into the wild for the very first time. Now, the penguins are saving the world from an evil mad scientist creating mutants.
No way!
To me, this felt like a Despicable Me knockoff. There's too many ideas going on, a lot of cheap gags and low-hanging fruit humor. There's also some odd stuff with the aspect ratio changing in the third act. So for me, much like penguins themselves, this one doesn't fly. Number 33, Shark Tale, a lame underwater film with few redeeming qualities besides the voice talent. And coming out a year after Finding Nemo simply makes it look bad by comparison. The movie relies far too much on pop culture references instead of wit. And this is particularly a problem because so many of the pop culture references are to rated R movies from 30 years before this movie came out. And the message about being yourself and accepting others who are different is just way too on the gill. I'm sorry, that joke was a little bit fishy. Will Smith gives it his all, but there's simply nothing more to the film than his charm, and not even he can keep this one afloat. Next up, Shrek the Third. This movie simply feels like they ran out of new ideas and had to recycle what worked in the previous two films. It kicks off with a series of contrived circumstances showing how Shrek is unfit to be king, and it only goes downhill from there. The prime example of how recycled this film feels is that they brought Prince Charming back and they simply don't have anything to do with him. Even the idea of bringing King Arthur into it should be a really good idea for this franchise, but it just falls flat and this movie has nothing new to offer the franchise. Number 31, The Road to El Dorado. What should be a fun adventure about two guys seeking fame and glory is spoiled by a pair of unlikable leads. They're just too selfish and manipulative to be characters that I can root for. And unfortunately, the plot is too familiar. Therefore, we're on an adventure that we've seen before with a couple of characters we don't want to go on it with. This is all really unfortunate because actually it really like the animation style of this film with classic 2D character designs, but with turn of the century technology. I like the way it looks, just not the story or the characters. Bringing us into the top 30 is Madagascar 3, Europe's Most Wanted. This movie, it's fine, it's harmless, but I just feel it kind of lost the basic premise of the franchise by taking this set of characters and sending them from Africa, from Madagascar, to Europe. It's also so frantic and goes to so many different locations that I couldn't lock onto anything in particular. And given that I thought the second movie actually had a little bit of emotional resonance to it, this one just felt like a big step backwards. Now, where it ends things, I think, kind of tied things together nicely a little bit, but overall, just kind of a dull addition to the franchise. Number 29, Monsters vs. Aliens. It's got a fun premise, a lively set of characters, and a talented voice cast. But it doesn't do anything interesting with the concept. It's a very action-heavy film, so you see a bunch of alien versus monster situations, but when it comes to the humor, it's not nearly as sharp as it should be. And it tries to give our lead character a character arc by making her fiancé a big jerk, but the whole thing just felt really weak to me. And whose idea was it to cast Paul Rudd as an unlikable jerk? Then we have Turbo. Takes a pretty weird premise about a racing snail and does a decent job with it and is fairly effective by the time you get to the end of the film. But there's a few too many things going on here, as you have a snail that wants to be a racer and is misunderstood by the people around him. He gains superpowers. There's other snail racers with their own set of superpowers, kind of. You got the taco truck guys. There's so many moving parts that I don't think it does any one of them particularly well. So you have a okay movie that doesn't distinguish itself with any one particular thing. At number 27, Sinbad, Legend of the Seven Seas, a fun enough adventure. I always like to see these later 2D animation films. I love the way that they kind of look, but our lead character here, once again, just isn't likable enough for me to want to go on this adventure with him. At the beginning, he's just a bit too foolish and selfish for me to care about what happens to him. It's also a fairly generic quest film, and there's a lot of these types of films out there, and it's not one of the better ones of the bunch. So when I'm in the mood for watching one of these films, probably gonna pick something else. Number 26, Trolls. The basic premise of the film involves trolls fleeing for their lives so that they're not eaten alive. Charming. And a set of creatures that can't be happy unless they're eating trolls alive. Great message. Justin Timberlake's character doesn't sing anymore because the last time he sang, his grandmother died. Another weird message about responsibility and how to respond to tragedy. From there, we get a bunch of cute trolls who fart glitter and poop out edible cupcakes. It's got all the fart jokes that a 5-year-old will love, but with a plot about Bergens eating trolls alive that no parent will like. But where this one gets complicated, the music is great. It's filled with catchy songs that will be stuck in your head on repeat. In fact, I bought my daughter a Trolls karaoke machine packed with the full soundtrack for this film preloaded into it. As off-putting as the plot and messaging are, it kind of distinguishes itself with its music and makes it kind of watchable in that way. Number 25, Madagascar. The movie's basic premise about zoo animals who end up in Madagascar is pretty fun, but the experience overall is mixed for me. Some of that is that the setup for how they get to Madagascar is way too convoluted and complex. Another part is it's so hyperactive that it feels like it's much more interested in setting up jokes and gags than having a compelling plot. So while there are some chuckles here and there, I don't really connect with it all that much. At number 24, Wallace and Gromit, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit. This one simply isn't for me. My wife loves this movie, puts it on quite frequently, and has a lot of fun with the British wordplay and the scenarios, the stop motion, and I can appreciate the creativity that goes into these films, but I don't like that it's applied to this particular plotline, especially rewatching it. I simply do not care about were-rabbits or any of this stuff, and I wish that they applied all of their skill to a more appealing story. Real quick, before I give you my final picks for this video, be sure to let me know your least favorite DreamWorks animation films down below in the comments section. Also, remember this is a 2-part series, and I will be back tomorrow with my top 20 DreamWorks animation films, so be sure to come back tomorrow to check that out, or if you're watching this in the future, just check it out right up here. Next up, Shrek Forever After. This one's a big improvement over Shrek the Third, though that's not really saying a whole lot. It's always a lot of fun to kind of see these what-if scenarios and alternate ways, things that could play out. I did have a lot of fun with Rumpelstiltskin. I thought he was a memorable, conniving villain that added something a little bit new to the mix, but just in general, it all feels a little bit played out. There's not that creative spark that there was with the first 2 films. There's just a bit of going through the motions, trying to recapture what came so naturally during the first 2. Number 22, Flushed Away. Its very witty British sense of humor makes it cut through and gives it its own distinct style. It moves at a brisk pace and doesn't overstay its welcome. But I just don't really care about these characters or this plot. They don't have any resonance with me. I was chuckling all throughout the film. I just didn't care about anything that was happening. That tends to be what happens with a lot of these Aardman films. They're very clever. I just don't care about the stories that they're telling. Also, this one is so chaotic and frantic that it feels at times that it's tripping over itself trying to get to the next gag. Then we have Madagascar Escape to Africa. This is my favorite of the Madagascar films. It has all the ADD humor of the other films in this franchise, but I think it does the best job of having a clear story, identifiable conflicts, character arcs, character development, setup, payoff, all of it having a bit more emotional resonance. You have an old woman boxing a lion, but then you have an emotional reunion between a father and son. So for me, this is the one that had the most to offer. At the same time, given the placement on this list, I'm not the biggest fan of this franchise in general, but this is my favorite of the films. Remember to come back tomorrow to see my top 20 favorite DreamWorks animation films, or if you're watching in the future, you can just check it out right down there right now. Or if you want me to go more in depth with some of these films, check out that playlist right over there with a bunch of my other DreamWorks rankings. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.